morning. Thank you all for being here. I'd like to start by introducing some of our honored guests who will not be speaking, and also some of our honored guests and partners who will be speaking. We have with us today, among those who will not be speaking directly, but I think are speaking with their presence, we have Michael Cogbill from the Charles Foundation, who wants us to know how important what we are announcing today is for people affected by violence and for people of color. We have Brian Miller from Heeding God's Call, whose life's work has an awful lot to do with the prevention of gun violence, who wants to make sure we know that what we are talking about today is an important disincentive to illegal gun trafficking. We have Jeff Dempsey and Christian Soltiziak from Ceasefire PA, who have, among other things, pointed out that when the state legislature fails to act, as is so common in these United States, and especially as is going on in Pennsylvania, it's important for municipalities to step up within their powers to take steps to keep people safe. We have Movita Johnson-Harrell, who, in addition to being our Chief of Victim Services and Restorative Justice, is also, in a prior life, the founder of the Charles Foundation, a foundation named after her son, who was murdered, as were two other members of her family who became victims of murder and gun violence. We have Elizabeth Lee from the organization Orange Wave, which, like some of the other organizations here, takes a keen interest in public safety and gun violence. And we have a number of people from Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, also known as Everytown for Gun Safety. We have Melissa Cardin, Lauren Williams, Andy Snyder, Jay Falk, and Cameron Watkins. Our speakers today will include Kimberly Burrell, who has herself experienced gun violence, and she'll explain that to you, and who is also a member of the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office's CVAC, which is the group that advises on victim-related issues. We have our Police Commissioner, Richard Ross, who has been a tremendous partner and asset in all of our efforts this year, even when we had slight disagreements and we didn't have too many. He has been a tremendous asset. We have two of our finest councilmen, if one of them makes it here, but we have Kenyatta Johnson at this time, and we hope to have Curtis Jones shortly thereafter. We have Diana Cortez, who is the chair of the litigation group for the City of Philadelphia Law Department, and we will have Bilal Qayyum, very well-known community activist, here in the capacity of the Father's Day Rally Committee today. Oh, I'm sorry. And we have Council President Darrell Clark, who I apologize.
It's okay.
All right. Okay. So this whole thing starts with Council President Darrell Clark, and with the fact that in 2009, the council understood the importance of being proactive in efforts to interfere with illegal trafficking in guns on the street of Philadelphia. This is a battle that Council President has fought for 10 years. For 10 years. He's been trying to get a district attorney's office in Philadelphia to keep its promise and to actually pursue these cases. And we are delighted to have the opportunity to be able to step up and assist in that regard. But this is truly his work and the work of our city council and the work of our city that got us here. So we are here today to announce something that I view as being very common sense. It is a partnership between the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office, Philadelphia City Council, the City Solicitor's Office, to enforce City Council's ordinance, which is designed to hold accountable irresponsible individuals who fail to report lost or stolen firearms. As I said, this ordinance has existed since 2009. It's pretty easy. Somebody steals your gun, you lose your gun, you got to get on the phone and call 911 to let them know that happened. That's it. This is not something that regulates guns. It doesn't even regulate gun owners. This is something that regulates people who say they have lost their guns or who say their guns are stolen. Now, why are we doing this? Well, it's real simple, and anybody who's been around criminal justice for 30 years, as I have, knows. A lot of the guns that are claimed to be lost and stolen never were. They were sold illegally, and they end up in the hands of people who commit crimes. It is extremely common that when we have a homicide, the gun that is used in the homicide was lawfully purchased by someone who had nothing to do with the homicide, or the gun that may be found in the pocket of someone who is killed in a crime or who was arrested in connection with a crime was purchased legally by someone from a gun shop a long time ago. So how did that gun get from the legal purchaser to this crime? And the answer, far too often, is it was illegally sold. And when we go to investigate it, what we find is that the lawful purchaser is scratching his chin, saying, yeah, I got lost. Yeah, it disappeared from my car. Really? Did you tell your insurance company? No. Did you tell the police? No. But that's your story. Yup. And they've been getting away with it. And they've been getting away with it for a long time. Well, what we're talking about here today is designed to bring some accountability to those bogus stories, and it's also designed to elevate and lift up the honest folks whose guns were stolen or were lost legitimately, because all they got to do to be lifted up is lift up the phone and call 911. That's what people who aren't selling guns on the street do. And the ones who are selling guns on the street keep their mouths shut until those guns turn up in the middle of a crime. So, this law has been on the books for quite some time, but this is the first time the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office has stepped up to the plate and made a strong commitment to work with our partners to enforce the law. So here's a warning to every person in Philadelphia who has lost or had stolen or maybe did something illegal with their firearm. If your gun is lost or stolen and you do not report it, and the deadline is 24 hours, then you could face a fine of up to $2,000. For repeat offenders, do it twice, the penalty could be $2,000 and as much as 90 days in jail. I cannot tell you the numbers of times we find that there is a person who has purchased as many as 20 guns over many years. And when one of them pops up in a crime and we go to investigate, lo and behold, the rest of them are all missing too. None of it reported. Well, people who want to engage in that game, first of all, if we can prosecute them criminally for more serious things, we will. But if we cannot, we will go after them for this. The method, as I said, is simple. You call 911 within 24 hours of discovering your gun is lost or stolen. Now, we understand that even though we could enforce this going back several years, we understand that there are some people who may not be aware. This ordinance was not publicized by prior district attorney's offices as it should have been because they were unwilling to prosecute. Well, we are here to publicize it, and we are also here to be even-handed and fair. So there will be a 30-day amnesty period under this ordinance for people who now, right now, report firearms that were lost or stolen in the past. 24 hours ago, 24 days ago, 5 years ago. The exception is for any investigation underway or initiated by other sources. So let me be clear. This is an amnesty for this ordinance only, and it's for people who do the right thing, which is step up and say, actually, my gun was lost a year ago, and this is how it got lost, and they provide that information to 911. This is not an amnesty for other crimes, and this is not an amnesty for something we are already investigating, and we are already actively investigating some of these cases. We have some that are very close to being ready to bring forward, and you will be getting further news about that in the fairly near future. Ultimately, this enforcement mechanism is about people. It's not about guns, and it strives to improve public safety. The Gun Violence Task Force will trace gun ownership to the last known owner. Upon interviewing the last known owner, if the Gun Violence Task Force, and this, by the way, would be the DA's side of the Gun Violence Task Force, the DA's office, because we are the ones taking the lead on this. The Attorney General's office is not involved. If we determine that someone was involved in a straw purchasing case and we can prosecute it, we will. If no illegal transfer occurred, then we will conclude the investigation at that level. However, all the relevant investigatory materials will then be reviewed by the Philadelphia DAO's working group for a city ordinance infraction. If the city code requiring gun owners to report lost or stolen firearms is found to have been violated by this working group, and it's the owner's first offense, the case will be referred to the city solicitor's office for a civil penalty of not more than $2,000. If it is not the owner's first offense, in other words, we're on 2 or more, then the Philadelphia DA's office will prosecute pursuant to Section 10838A, failure to report lost or stolen firearms. That would be a summary offense, which can result in up to 90 days in jail as well as that fine. At this time, I would ask to come forward, and she is already forward, Kimberly Burrell, to deliver a few remarks about her experience with gun violence.
Thank you. Sure. Hello, everyone. As D.A. Krasner said, my name is Kimberly Burrell. I lost my son, Darrell A. Prey, Jr., in 2009, around the same time that the ordinance was enacted. And to state the fact that we're here in 2019 still talking about something that has not changed, the way that, in particular, African-American males die on the streets of the city of Philadelphia, is really disheartening. My son was murdered. The young man who killed him was 22. I said Darrell was 18. The young man's gun was a straw sale purchase. My son had a gun on him that was never discharged. That was also a straw sale purchase. So we have 2 children with guns on them that they did not purchase. Okay, one's dead, and one's in jail. Okay, the young man who murdered my son also, his brother was lost that day. Consequently, from July to November, 8 lives were lost directly related to my son passing. We're talking about 8 lives lost, and none of these young men own these guns. That's an atrocity to me. It took me a long time to be able to be my son's voice. It took me a long time to get past the pain of losing a child. What I really want the community to understand is that it just doesn't affect that one child when someone is murdered. It affects a mother, it affects a father, it affects communities, it connects everyone around us. My son had 4 other siblings. They are still being affected to this day by that murder. That has to change. If we have 2 or 3 kids dying every other day and they're all in the same community, this hurts our city and it hurts our country. Darrell was a loving boy. He was 18. He was in the streets. I did my best as a mother to try to deter him. He was signed up to go to school in August. He died in July. Imagine that. He graduated high school at 15, so he wasn't a dummy. He wasn't a dummy. I just want you to take from me is that, what I want you to take from me is this. The community hurts when guns are not being accounted for. We hurt. Financially, mentally, socially, physically, it hurts a community, and it eventually hurts a city and then a country. I just want y'all to take that from there. I still feel pain. Yesterday, I was just going off about, my son missing. And I was thinking like, oh, shoot, today I have to speak about him. He was on my mind. He was in my spirit yesterday. He was letting me know, Mom, it's okay. I'm on the CVAC committee as well. And I just want to tell you, to hear the stories that we go through, I still feel the same pain. 10 years later, we're still dealing with this. The press will report. That's it. My son could have lived also. He could have lived, but he laid on the ground for about 35 minutes bleeding to death. Because probably no one wanted to touch him. No one wanted to throw him in their car and drive him to the hospital, scared that more bullets would fly. Bullets not owned or not purchased by the people that are using them. They don't have the money to get these guns in here. So someone's buying them for them. Someone needs to be accountable. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And this is a war we all need to fight. We can no longer look the other way, because if it happens to me, it's going to affect you one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burrell. And next we will hear from a truly central figure on this issue, Council President Darrell L. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. DA. Good morning. DA, thank you for having the stones, and that's not the word I want to use. Yes. Right? Not the word I would. Well, I'm just saying. I was advised not to say the other word, all right? Because the simple reality is that we were promised years ago, and it was teed up, right? We were ready to proceed. The mayor, the police commissioner at that time, I think the police commissioner was here as the deputy police commissioner at that time. We were ready, and the district attorney just decided that we're not going to go that direction because there was some constitutional issue involved. Well, you know what? Guess what? We don't care about the Constitution. We care about our citizens. We care about our young people. We care about the people in the city of Philadelphia. So I want to thank you so much for what you're doing today. This is real simple. As was said, years ago, we moved forward. We thought we had a good sense case on a very reasonable approach to gun safety. And the simple reality is that you go to King of Prussia, right? You're out there shopping and you leave your credit card on the table and, it gets lost, or somebody picks your pocket in the middle of rush hour in terms of the Christmas holiday, right? First thing you do is get on that phone and call your bank and say, stop the credit card because I don't want anybody to use it, all right? Your car gets stolen, right? Look out, morning, car's gone. You on there calling commissioner and his folks, 911, somebody stole my car, right? I don't want somebody to take my car and strip it or run into somebody, then I'm held liable. So if you do all of that for a car and a credit card, what is the problem with you reporting a gun that's lost or stolen? I don't understand that, right? I don't understand that. So today, Mr. District Attorney, I want to thank you, your team. I want to thank everybody here for the support of my colleagues in council, Councilman Johnson and Councilman Jones, who's not here, and actually Councilwoman Parker, who was in the General Assembly when we initially passed this bill. I want to thank all of the support that was given. It is a new day. We're going to move ahead, and as was said by the District Attorney, we're sending notice, and we're going to put this out in a very, very aggressive way to let people know you have 30 days to, report the gun. Commissioner, 911? 911. There's no excuse. Thank you. Thank everybody for involved. It's time to deal with this very, very critical issue to make sure that these guns don't get in the hands of people who are irresponsible. So thank you so much, Mr. DA.
Ovaries? Just saying. Stones, ovaries? Same thing. Intestinal fortitude. Anyway, at this time, we would like to call forward Commissioner Richard Ross, who obviously must be losing sleep, as we all are, about this issue. I think any truly great police commissioner would be losing sleep in any great American city.
All right, thank you, and I guess it's good morning still. Guns, just like politics and religion, difficult to speak about. People usually revert back to their neutral corners, and you can't have an intelligent conversation, which is unfortunate. But here's the reality, is what we know from the research. There are actually people out there who are avid gun lovers who are actually in support of things like this. When you strip all the rhetoric away, most of those folks actually are more in support of this. It's just a minority that has a very loud voice that dominates this conversation, would even have you believe that, responsible gun owners actually are not in support of this, which they are, because I know many of them. And so one of the things that clearly, we want to deal with is a mechanism to people understand this is important to us. This is one of those things that we believe will help us. You have to play this role, and we can't get mired in this notion that this is not going to matter. Every little thing does matter. All these things are interconnected. All these lives are touched. I mean, you hear that powerful story about 8 lives lost in that period of time. And that gets replayed over and over again with the back and forth. And people always, well, how did the guns get here? Well, it's already been explained. I mean, the ATF will tell you that's how they get here. Straw purchasing, people losing their guns, people selling guns. There's not a tractor trailer that pulls up at Broad and such and lets out a bunch of guns. That's not what happens. That's not what has happened in a number of years now. But what we have seen, this is my 30th year doing this in this city. And for 30 years, we've been dealing with the same issue Yeah, we deal with ebbs and flows in terms of our numbers, but it's the same intractable problem over and over with real lives behind the numbers that get reported. And when you hear about stories like this that absolutely break your heart, you got to wonder why people won't step up and do something as simple as this. And so, if it's just one step in that direction, it's something that we're going to celebrate. And we've got, people in place in our gun violence task force that we put in place even in the department that we believe that'll help us. So thank you, Council President, DA, for pushing this forward, and so that everyone else recognize you do play a role in this in some way, shape, or fashion. As was mentioned previously, all of us are touched by this, whether you're touched by it financially or you're just touched by it in terms of the image of the city that you don't want to have, and that goes on and gets replayed over and over again. So hopefully folks will understand just picking up the phone and dial 911, just let that play out and we'll go from there.
Thanks again to our Commissioner, Richard Ross. I would now like to introduce Councilman Kenyatta Johnson, who for 8 years has been a champion and has been passionate about stopping gun violence, and even before that, as a state rep, he was passionate about those issues, including about this particular ordinance. Councilman?
I want to take a moment and ask everyone to just applaud the efforts of this district attorney for having the courage and stepping up to the plate and enforcing this ordinance. I just want to thank you because we are truly in a state of emergency right now as a city when it comes to gun violence. Last week, the council president and the mayor and other stakeholders unveiled a plan to talk about safer communities. But I'm an advocate in making sure we track down where these illegal guns are coming from. And this being a young man growing up in South Philadelphia and who personally lost a family member to gun violence, I remember in the early 90s we had a drug problem, but in 2000s we have a gun problem. And I'm a personal advocate in recognizing that these guns are coming from somewhere. The council president knows and everyone else knows there are no AR-15 factories in Strawberry Mansion, and there are no AR-15 factories in Point Breeze. So these guns are coming from somewhere. This is a step in the right direction. But most importantly, the reason why I applaud the efforts for the district attorney is because it's going to take all of us to step up and roll up our sleeves to address this issue. I'm going to take my elected official hat off. As a dad of 2 African-American young men growing up in this city of Philadelphia, if we keep going in this direction, the chances of them reaching adulthood are slim. So for me, this is personal. It's not about politics, because I recognize if we don't do everything we can possible to keep the guns out of the hands of our children, then this city will go down the drain. And most importantly, we can't have a tale of two cities where everyone on one side is doing great, but babies are being murdered in the streets of Philadelphia on a day-to-day basis. So I applaud this young lady for stepping up here and talking about the pain that she has to deal with day in and day out. That's the life I deal with when I'm out on the street talking to mothers and fathers who have lost their lives to gun violence. So this is a step in the right direction. I feel a sense of hope, and let's all roll up our sleeves and get some work done. Thank you, Mr. District Attorney.
Thank you again to Councilman Kenyatta Johnson. And now we will hear from Diana Cortez, who is the chair of the litigation group of the City of Philadelphia Law Department.
Thank you, District Attorney Krasner. Good morning, everyone. Before I go into this, I want to thank everyone who's up here, and in particular echo the thank yous and the thank yous to District Attorney Krasner for having the courage to go forward with this ordinance when many others did not want to take that stand. I also want to thank in particular those working with him closely in order to make this day possible. Mike Lee, Nancy Winkleman, who we at the City Law Department worked closely in order to get us to the today. So I want to thank them. I want to thank Council President Clark and Councilman Johnson and Jones, who couldn't be with us. In particular, Council President Clark, not only for initiating this ordinance, but also for not giving up on it, and also Councilman Johnson, and we know Jones too, based on his statements on the mayor's gun initiative press conference last week. We take this they take this very seriously, and so we thank you for your support in this. I also want to thank the Law Department's legislative unit who were critical in drafting this ordinance, and in addition in trying to make sure that there was ways to enforce it and make sure that we were able to do so. I want to thank Commissioner Ross and the Philadelphia Police Department for their continued commitment to investigating and making sure we deal with this public health crisis. And as Ms. Burrell so bravely and eloquently stated, this is a war that we are fighting, and that we can no longer stay silent and stay idle. So right now, on behalf of the Law Department, I am enthusiastic and excited to be able to play our role in this fight, to pick up our arms, our typewriter, our computers, our papers, and get ready to review these files and file them in court and make sure that we keep these different individuals accountable. The Law Department embraces its part in the city's multifaceted approach to combat the crisis of gun violence. So just to give you a little information on the Law Department's unit who will be handling these cases, it is the Code and Public Nuisance Litigation Unit, and it's a unit comprised of 15 lawyers. Last year, they prosecuted over 8,000 civil cases and brought in over $2 million in fines. So while they are a small group, they are a formidable group. And under the direction of Kristen Bray, their chief, and myself, we stand ready to enforce this and to take up our fight in this war. Thank you.
Thanks again to the City Law Department, which of course is partnering with us in pursuing these different remedies. And also thank you for recognizing Nancy Winkleman, our chief of our law division in the Philadelphia DA's office, and Mike Lee, who's right there in his bow tie, who is an all-purpose repairman for justice. And this is just one more of the projects he's been fixing with that toolbox. All right. And now we would like to call forward one of Philadelphia's best known and frankly most eloquent community activists, and that is Bilal Qayyum, who is here for the Father's Day Rally Committee.
Good morning. President Darrell Clark, Council Member Kenyatta Johnson, and also our DA. Let me quickly say this. This T-shirt I have on, 10 years ago, I walked to Harrisburg. It took me 6 days and a whole bunch of corns on my feet, but I made it. The walk was about two things: increasing the job opportunities, because I really believe creating jobs is going to help reduce shootings. But the other thing was two pieces of legislation was in the State House. One was the lost and stolen, and the other one was one gun a month. You can only buy one gun a month, but you could buy 12 guns a year. Since that time, I have been out in the forefront every single day almost, rallying and organizing folks. I am glad to stand here with my comrades that are all involved in the struggle every day. As of 2016, we had 1,276 shootings in the city. 2017, 1,208 shootings. 2018, 1,364 shootings, which is a total of 3,848 citizens who have been shot in the city of Philadelphia in the last 3 years. I really believe this with the DA, and I will say, Councilman Clark and all the young ladies in the room, forgive me, but I'm going to say it. I'm glad that our DA had the balls to stand up and is going to push this, because I really believe that this is going to help, and I know that the commissioner will verify that probably out of these 3,848 shootings, almost all were illegal guns, or guns that, well, I'm saying illegal, were lost or stolen that someone found or sold. So I'm very happy to see today that this is happening. The last thing I want to say, and this is to the reporters, there was a study done 15 years ago in Seattle, Washington, and they traced 66 guns over a period of a year that were stolen from a house. all 66 of those guns ended up in some act of violence in the city of Seattle. So that shows you they were legal guns that were stolen out of someone's house that ended up in a crime. So that shows you how important that this bill is, and with the support of the DA. And once again, I got to commend him and the council folks for standing up. And most importantly, I know that everybody's standing behind me is glad and excited that this day is happening. It's a shame it took 10 years, but sometimes the struggle is not overnight success, it's long-term success. Thank you.
I just have another brief comment or two, and then we are going to take questions for this distinguished panel here. Although I cannot stress enough how wonderful I think it is that the council president has pushed for a decade for this. I think that says a lot. So in a little bit, you're going to hear a loud, irritating noise. It's going to sound like a broken engine. That would be the National Rifle Association, also known as our NRA. I will stand with any elected official, any community activist, any organization that is willing to stand up to an organization that after the Las Vegas shooting likes bump stocks. I will stand with any other elected officials who recognize the insanity of wanting it to be okay to produce your own gun with a 3D printer. I have a hunter safety certificate. I obtained it. My children all have hunter safety certificates. My mother's side of the family all hunted. My father-in-law's side of the family were all military, and many of them remain hunters. This is not about guns. This is about being reasonable. The positions the NRA has taken are similar to saying we cannot have license plates on cars, we cannot do inspections of cars, and we can't even regulate the age of the drivers or whether or not they can see. Their position on reasonable approaches to regulation guns is absurd, and here we have an ordinance that is not even regulating guns. All that we are doing here is saying if you don't have your guns anymore, then you better go ahead and report it within 24 hours. But you are going to hear that loud screeching noise, that sound of a broken engine. And yes, it is really true that the NRA is a broken engine in our United States, that it is completely out of touch, and its foolishness is out of touch with what people who appropriately handle and own guns believe. Are there any questions for our distinguished group? Yes.
How do you fight the NRA? I mean, you know, you're right. You're going to file some sort of lawsuit or legal action. How do you push back?
Well, you know, if they wish to file, as they almost always do, some sort of illegal action, then the city of Philadelphia will, of course, defend its opportunity to enforce this regulation. It will be decided in the courts. We don't think that they are legally correct. In fact, we're pretty sure that they're not legally correct. But, you know, I suppose they can do what they've always done, and they can do it while they're in the middle of an investigation for their involvement with Russian money, and they can do it while they're suffering difficulties in collecting donations, which I guess is what happens when you're in favor of more and more guns completely unregulated in the middle of a spate of school shootings across the country.
So is the crux of your legal argument that you're not regulating guns, you're asking people to be responsible when their guns are stolen?
Well, I think that is certainly, I don't know that I'd say it's a legal argument. I think it's just true that we're not regulating guns. These are people who say, I don't have my guns anymore. We're talking about what it is you have to do when you don't have something anymore. So I think that that's true, but I will defer to the city law department, who may very well want to put what they have to say in writing as opposed to talking about it here.
Mr. DA, the council president introduced this legislation 10 years ago. Why did the former DA not take up this issue? In your
I hate to pick between two wonderful journalists, but I'm glad you both have the same question. You're asking me why prior district attorneys did not do this? I mean, I'm sorry, I missed that.
10 years ago, the council president introduced.
Oh, yes. Okay, I'm sorry. I just was having difficulty hearing. So you want to know why prior DAs didn't pursue it? Well, I guess you could ask them, but I will say this. There certainly is a long history of prosecutors in the United States making decisions that were political and specifically about their own politics, their own career advancement, And we are living in a state where it has long been believed that in order to run statewide, you got to be good with the NRA. So, I can't read their minds. I can certainly tell you I think any claim that they had a good legal basis for not following it is disingenuous. I've examined this closely, so have all the lawyers involved. And, frankly, I've said it many times, I'd much rather do the right thing than get reelected.
Council President, can you offer some clarification? When it passed in 2008, Lynn Abraham said it was unconstitutional, but Mayor Nutter said that they didn't need the district attorney's office to enforce it, that the city could do it on its own. That doesn't sound like that's the case anymore.
Well, we always needed the district attorney's office to enforce because you had to be able to take it to court. And the understanding was at that time that we would immediately, as the DA says, serve some papers from the National Rifle Association. This particular case actually made it all the way to the Commonwealth Court. The Supreme Court, which we had hoped we would make it to as possibly the defendant, said that we did not have a person involved with the NRA that had the appropriate standing, meaning that nobody enforced the law, i.e. taking an action. That's not going to be the case in this particular instance because the DA will enforce the law. There will be an action taken as it relates to this ordinance, so we anticipate that we'll probably be back in court. We welcome that conversation because we really think that we're within the rights of our jurisdiction.
Mayor Nutter misspoke when he said that the city could enforce this without the district attorney's office?
I actually don't remember him saying that, but we always needed the district attorney, and we had a big meeting in the Mayor Nutter's office, and Mayor was ready. Ramsey at that point in time was ready. We were ready to move ahead. Initially, Lynn Abraham, who was the DA at the early part of this conversation, basically said she wasn't going to do it. The subsequent DA indicated during the course of the election that he was going to do it, but when he got elected, for whatever reason, we got a similar response that because of the Constitution, he wasn't prepared to proceed. Fortunately, this DA puts people in this particular case, particularly for legislation that's clearly within our right to enforce, ahead of that particular mindset. You're welcome.
Mr. Attorney Kreiser, you said that the Attorney General is not involved in this. Did you want him involved? Did you seek him involved? Did he decline to be involved in some way?
I think you could direct that to the State Attorney General. I can tell you that I will stand with any chief prosecutor that stands up to the NRA.
Did you ask him to be involved? Did you folks reach out to him and ask him to be involved in the effort?
There is a joint task force, which is the Gun Violence Task Force, that includes both members of the Attorney General's office and members of the District Attorney's office, and they work together in order to do gun enforcement. We are collaborating in many, many ways with that office. However, they have declined to participate in this effort.
They have? You asked them and they said they wouldn't take part in this?
My answer is that they have declined to participate in this effort.
Is $2,000 punitive enough for people involved in the business of moving guns onto the black market?
No, it's not.
So how does it stop anything?
Well, let me answer your question there. It is $2,000 as a civil fine for a first offense. It is $2,000 plus up to 90 days in jail for a second or third or fourth or 10th offense. This is the tool we as a municipality have available to us. What we really need is the Pennsylvania legislature to stand up and the United States government to stand up to the NRA and do the right thing. But we are going to operate within our lane to do as much as we can. And I think this was an excellent effort on the part of City Council 10 years ago. And I frankly hope it'll have a tremendous impact.
Do you have a number on what percentage of guns used in crime were either lost or stolen?
I do not offhand. Does anyone else up here?
How about murders? Do you know numbers on number of people?
May I just have a second here? Let me just check and see if I have an answer to that question.
No, we don't have a number exactly on that, but we know that, and Mayor Nutter said it, that 85% or so of the guns used in murder in the city were handguns, and of those, 100% of those guns were illegal guns. And this ordinance is intended to be a disincentive to gun trafficking. The streets are awash with illegal guns. And this is finally one step, an important step, to try to cut that so that there are fewer guns on the street. It's harder to get these guns, and so on and so forth. We know this last year the gun murder rate increased in this city. In the rest of the country, it's going down. This is a problem that Philadelphia has. It's a horrible problem that Philadelphia has. And anything that can be done to try to stop the movement of guns to the street is important. It should have been done 10 years ago. It's great to see this district attorney take this on, and we assume that he's going to take on even more because we hear him speak. But something needs to be done, and thank God Larry's going to do it.
Larry, do you have any numbers to back this up? What percentage of guns out there would fall under this? What percentage of gun owners have worked in a straw purchase method?
You know, I can give you anecdotal information. I don't have specific numbers. I can certainly tell you that if we look within the frame of guns that are confiscated from homicide scenes, for example, or guns that are eventually connected to the bullets that were used to kill, if we look within that framework, we see extremely large numbers of them that were purchased illegally. The average person who is accused of a homicide is not a person who is eligible to purchase a firearm at a lawful establishment. But if you would like us to see if we can dig in and get you more statistics, I'm happy to do that.
Do you think your effort will convince the legislature here anyway, which has changed a bit, to one, limit the number of guns that a legal purchaser can buy in Pennsylvania during a legal purchase, which I think is almost unlimited, and the idea of making the straw purchase of guns, in fact, a criminal offense? Can this convince them to move in that way?
Well, here's the reality. In the midterm elections, 54% of Pennsylvanians voted for Democratic candidates, but the state is still gerrymandered, and it's in the stranglehold of a Republican Party that refuses to condemn Donald Trump. That's the reality. I don't think that we can expect courageous and intelligent legislation to come from the Republican members of our legislature. On the other hand, we did pick up a bunch of seats in Pennsylvania and nationally, and we have some very enthusiastic, forward-thinking, modern, and in many cases young legislators coming out of Philadelphia, both at the state level and also at the national level. My office, which has a policy team and also is willing to participate in any way that we can with assisting with this type of legislation, has already reached out to these folks and said, please, we don't want credit, we don't want control. If there's something we can do to give you the science, if there's something we can do to assist with language, let us know. And I'm very excited about what we may see coming from some of our Philadelphia area legislators.
Mr. President, I know that with the laws that passed in 2008, that they would fine individuals if the gun was seized or found to be in the commission of a crime. I spoke to the leader of a support group for mothers who lost their kids to violence, and they suggested a task force. You already have one, but that periodically, either quarterly or annually, checks in with gun owners and does an inspection to see if they still own that. Councilman Jones yesterday expressed support for that kind of measure. Is there any appetite in your office to support something like that?
There is appetite to support measures like that, but understand that our federal legislation has really made it very difficult to get access to all kinds of information, including information about where a gun that was used in a killing was originally purchased. A lot of this was done in order to make sure there would not be civil lawsuits against gun retailers. It was, of course, spearheaded by the NRA. So a lot of these sensible, intelligent, regulatory things we might want to do, or a lot of the investigations we might want to do, have been made more difficult by things like the TR Amendment and other types of legislation that have come down over the years. This will be a process, no matter how much this newest generation, who I believe are going to turn these issues around, it'll be a process that's going to take a while for us to change this so we can change that, so we can investigate this, so we can get that kind of legislation.
Just a quick clarifying question. Does the DA's office or maybe the city's solicitor's office have a list of registered gun owners in the city of Philadelphia? Is that the data point that's available?
I think the answer to that is no. And, yeah, the answer is no. They do probably have a list of people who have a permit to carry a firearm, but that's a very different question, and that is seldom going to be helpful in identifying people who are actually in the process of committing crimes. Let's remember, right now, not every gun-related crime gets solved. I mean, that's true in every single city, and needless to say, it's also true here. So the notion that we have eyes on every gun out there when there are more guns than people in the United States is simply an impossibility. But again, I will stand with any legislator or any elected official, any activist, any community group that wants to bring about more sensible legislation around public safety in relation to guns.
Where's the ATF here today? They can help you in a real way track guns. That's what they do. I mean, why are they not here?
There is no specific reason why they're not here. We work directly and indirectly with ATF all the time. We do so through the Gun Violence Task Force. But if what you're asking me is, do I think Donald Trump is good with this? I think he's not good with this. I think Donald Trump is good with the NRA, real good with the NRA, and I think the NRA is real good with Donald Trump and with Russia. So I wouldn't expect the ATF to come stampeding in these doors right now.
But what the ATF does for lost and stolen guns is, if they see what's happening is they are making visits to both, I think, private citizens and at gun stores where they believe there are large numbers of guns moving out. Have you not been told that? Do you not know that? Do you know?
Sir, I have been in criminal justice for 30 years. I have done tens of thousands of cases. I'm well aware of what the ATF does, and I've dealt with them directly myself for close to 30 years. I'm aware of that. Every law enforcement agency that deals with guns does that. That is nothing extraordinary. It's also not what we're doing here. What we are doing here is we're trying to bring an additional layer of responsibility. And no, I don't think that the United States government in this year with this president has any interest in doing something that is contrary to what the NRA wants.
Previously, DA, you've not supported a gun court, which was supported under the previous administration. Do you anticipate that changing at all?
Well, it depends on what you mean by a gun court. If what you mean by a gun court is a return to policies that have not advanced things, then no. If what you mean is a return to mandatory type approaches to criminal justice which have failed, the answer is no. But gun court, just like focused deterrence, just like prevention, is a vague term. And there certainly are some types of specific courts related to guns that we would support.
What about gun stat? Would you consider visiting that?
Gun stat as it existed in this office, no, because it was nothing but a batting average within the office for the cases that were already in the office, and it served no purpose. A lot of the supervisors in here advised me they spent 25% of their time compiling these batting averages as opposed to doing things that were, frankly, much more serious in relation to actually preventing violence. Let us remember, this year, we are 5 years into annual increases in the number of homicides in Philadelphia County. And that all happened while GunStat was going on, whatever it was. Ultimately, it was clear to us that the way it was orchestrated in this office, it was more of an impediment than a help to actually getting at gun violence.
Commissioner Ross, assuming that these guns are, as was mentioned, are stolen from legal gun owners, do you have any insight on what the reason people don't report stolen guns? Why, if it's simply just making a call to 911 saying my gun is stolen, why is that such a hard thing for people to do?
Oh, some people it's simply because I don't have to. I mean, it might sound simplistic, but I don't have to do it. And so that's unfortunate, and it sounds basic, and, the DA started, as well as the council president, it's common sense ordinance that we should utilize. Look, this is not an easy endeavor, but you got to start somewhere, right? And you got to be willing to do something. You got to try to get some traction somewhere. And so I don't think anybody here is in any way suggesting that this is a panacea for the gun violence we're dealing with here and in many cities across the country. But you've got to do something, and this is why we're for it. And as I started, there are far more people who are going to be in favor of it than you might believe. And that doesn't mean there won't be a fight, because I think they're prepared for that. But there are people who are avid gun lovers who just have common sense, and they know this just is something that should be done. That's the bottom line.
They don't report the gun because they've sold the gun. That's what's happening, right?
Well, that happens in some cases, but understand there are a myriad of reasons. Some of it is what you said. Some of it is because you don't have to. And so if you don't have to, and remember, there's a nexus between some level of criminality. If I know I can do this and I don't have to, I mean that's kind of that goes to reason that if I want or I'm inclined to, right? But let me just say, and this is just my opinion. When you asked a question about $2,000. Don't think that everyone who may sell a gun is a gun trafficker, and they might be an opportunist. And now if that dissuades you from doing that because you wouldn't have otherwise done it, and this may be just an opportunity to say, I'm going to sell this gun, it's no big deal. It is all a big deal, And so if you can stop a couple people from doing it, and then exponentially that has an impact, then that's something we're for.
But the process says you buy 10 guns, You take 5, you put them on the street, you don't have to report them. That's really the process, right?
Well, I mean, for some. But again, remember, I keep saying this over and over and over again, and this is not stats according to me. I just had a meeting with all my federal partners, and it wasn't about guns in particular, and I just had them reinforce. Guns are trafficked in a number of ways. This is one. This is just one, right? But again, do not think that there's some boat or some truck just coming somewhere. I mean, that's not what's happening, you know? But if you have the opportunity to put, whether it's 5 guns, 1 gun, or you lose your gun and you just don't even bother to report it, all those things are problematic to us, right? And so, because at the end of the day, if an individual gets his hands, or her hands, it's usually him, unfortunately, on a gun, you know, it then becomes a crime gun, because if you use it against a person illegally and you're not otherwise legally licensed to carry that gun, that is an illegal gun. We're trying to stop the flow of guns into the hands of people who would not otherwise use them wisely at a gun range or on a hunting range or what have you. And so that's the bottom line. But again, for us, this is just one piece, and I think the DA and the council president would tell you that. They're not suggesting that this is the end-all, the be-all by any stretch of the imagination.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I do just want to give you a little quickie nuts and bolts, though, because what we're talking about here is conceptual. Let me just tell you hypothetical. You're going to get the actual stories of these cases as we begin to prosecute them both civilly and criminally. But here's just a hypothetical for you. Let's just say Philadelphia DA's office does a drug raid. In the course of the drug raid, someone runs out of a major stash house in a heroin fentanyl operation, is being chased by police, and that person is holding a gun and is running away from police. Needless to say, we now have a situation where civilians and police are placed at great danger because that gun is in the hand. And when that person is arrested and the gun is taken away and they trace it to see where it came from, well, it came from someone who actually went to a gun shop and purchased that gun. And do you know what the story is coming from that person? Well, yeah, 2 years ago, I bought 2 guns. Really? Where'd you keep them? I kept them in a trash can. I kept them in a trash can outside of the house because I didn't want to upset my grandmother. Funny thing is, they disappeared 3 days later. Did you report it? No. How much did you buy the gun for? $100. This is what we're talking about. Ridiculous, nonsensical lies that are served up after a gun is in the hand of a criminal organization, endangering police, endangering civilians, defending the sale of opioids. That's what we're talking about. And that's why it is so important to be able to show that when someone does not report their gun lost or stolen, there's a reason for it, and that reason is that they are engaging in illegal activity on the street. Thank you very much.